Good afternoon. My name is Rob Zeil, and I'm the director of the Center for Public and Nonprofit Management. On behalf of Cleveland State University, Dean Anglin, and the Levin College Urban Affairs, just wanted to welcome you all to our fourth of four series here for our Meet the Mentor panel discussions. It's kind of crazy that we are wrapping up the series already, and the time has flown by, but I'm just thrilled to have the opportunity to have another very awesome panel that we have four folks with us today. We've really had the chance over this series to highlight 16 of our top-notch mentors throughout the series, and also for the first time this year have had the luxury of having some of our faculty members be the moderator for our panel discussions. So today's panel is going to be moderated by Dr. Clayton Wukich, who is our MPA Director. He's going to be introduced here shortly, but I just want to say thanks to him, a shout out to our faculty for all the support that they've given us through over the years, and also for being an active part of our program for this year. This is the last of our four panel discussions. We've also had a couple activities around networking opportunities, and then our program is going to end mid-April with some appreciation events for both our students and faculty. So for everybody that's part of the program, welcome. Thank you for everything you've done. For any of our guests and associates that are relatively new to the program, we really say thank you for taking your time to be with us today, and look forward to future events that will be coming in the near future. I want to thank Alexandra Higgle, who is our program manager and really the anchor behind this program, has developed all the entire lineup for the year and put a lot of effort into developing the program and the content for today and for the last three programs. So please join me and welcome Alexandra Higgle, and thanks for everything for today and for everything you've done for all of our programs. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the baton over to you. Thanks, everyone.
Well, thank you so much, Rob. Hello and welcome, everyone, to our fourth and final Meet the Mentors panel of this series. And as Rob said, it's really hard to believe that this is our last panel. But before I pass it over to our moderator, I wanted to personally thank everyone for your participation in this four-part series. We appreciate the commitment of the 16 mentors who volunteered to serve as panelists over this past academic year, the students who attended the discussions and asked really thoughtful questions, and the Levin College faculty members who moderated. We truly look forward to planning next year's panel discussion, and we welcome your feedback. So if you have any ideas or if there's anything you'd like to see incorporated in next year's panel series, please contact our center. Additionally, if you're a mentor or a mentee in this year's program, Rob noted that we have some upcoming events. So please keep an eye out for more information regarding our virtual speed networking event later in March. So speed networking this year is getting a new twist, and we're really excited to debut that. And finally, we have a few housekeeping items before we officially begin. As always, this session is being recorded and will be posted on Levin College's YouTube page. Special thanks goes out to our mentees, Amira, Rochelle, Tanisha, and Tariq for submitting questions ahead of time. And these particular mentees are the mentees of the panelists that you're going to hear from today. Additionally, all audience members are welcome to type and submit a question via the designated Q&A box that you should see on your screen. Please feel free to submit those questions throughout today's event, and we will answer those. And with that said, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Dr. Clayton Wukich, who is an associate professor, the director of the Master of Public Administration, or MPA program, and the interim director of the Master of Nonprofit Administration and Leadership, or the MNAL program at the Levin College. Dr. Clayton Wukich studies organizational theory, innovation, and behavior. His research explores the role of information and communications technology in enabling various forms of participation and collaboration. And Dr. Wukich earned a PhD in Public and International Affairs from the University of Pittsburgh. We truly appreciate his unwavering support and all that he does for our center and our students. And without further ado, Dr. Wukich.
Thanks, Alexandra, and thanks for everything that you do and Rob does to empower the mentoring program. You know, the students that I talk to, the incoming students, the prospective students, or current students, there's almost no conversation that I have where I don't mention the importance of our mentoring program and how it's really been a life-changing experience for so many of our students. The difference maker in the program that opens people's eyes, that allows them to network and to get an idea about where they want to, the trajectory of their career and where they want to go. And none of that is possible without Rob, without Alexandra, but especially our mentors. And these are people, these are public sector executives, nonprofit executives, in this case, in this panel, public sector executives and leaders who are really making a difference in the region and who are definitely making a difference in the lives of our students. So it is just a wonderful program to have and really makes a world of difference in the experience that Levin College students, graduate students, undergraduate students accrue while they are part of the Levin family. So without further ado, I do want to introduce our panelists for today, a distinguished group of public sector leaders. The first, Cassie Gaffney, who works as a senior strategist at one of Ohio's only women and minority-owned consulting firms, Advocacy and Communication Solutions, or ACS. She leads lobbying, capacity building, communication, and advocacy strategy development for ACS clients throughout the country. Prior to her return to ACS in 2020, she served as the Director of Government Affairs at Cleveland Rape Crisis Center, where she led the agency's government relations and public policy strategies. She's a Levin alum. At the Levin College, she worked with Senator Grace Drake to administer the same mentoring program we're talking about and celebrating today. So thank you, Cassie, and also just a way that we get to mention and celebrate the late Senator Grace Drake in this forum and all that she's done for us. Cassie mentors our two students, Tanisha Fair and Daniela Cortez. Cassie, welcome. Our next mentor is David Greenspan. He is the incoming City Council President for the City of Westlake. As a former state representative for Ohio's 16th District, Dave represented the region for 4 years and served on various committees, including chairing the Finance Subcommittee for Transportation, the House Finance Committee, and he served as the Vice Chair of the Transportation and Public Safety Committee. Representative Greenspan is a longtime Levin mentor, and he's a great friend and advocate for the college. He's definitely a supporter of our professional development programs and strongly believes in continuing education. He mentors Amira Mari. Next, Mr. Shetty Swade. Mr. Swade serves as the Business Continuity Lead at the Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland, a position he has held since July 2020. He has extensive experience working in city and county government in both Cleveland and Columbus, as well as in the nonprofit sector, with a focus in emergency management and also in the public health arena. This is his second year as a mentor. He is a committed friend of the Levin College, and he mentors Tariq Mohammed. So welcome, Shaddy. And last but not least, Beth Zietlow-DeJesus. She serves as the Director of External Affairs for the Alcohol Addiction and Mental Health Services Board of Cuyahoga County. Prior, she served as the Communications Director in the office of Mayor Frank Jackson. She has Levin connections. She's a graduate of our Leadership Academy, and she mentors Rochelle Miller. Now, that's only a small portion of her bio, and the rest of our mentors' bios. We're very lucky to talk to them today, fortunate to talk to them today. So let's get the conversation started, and let me ask the panel just to maybe tell us a little bit more about your professional and your academic backgrounds. Let our students who are watching know about where you're coming from and your backgrounds, as well as what you do on a day-to-day basis in your jobs today. Whoever wants to grab that question first, feel free to jump in.
I can jump in. So again, hi, I'm Cassie. I'm so grateful to be here. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone at the Levin College and the other panelists. This is such an important program, and I'm just really excited to be here. In terms of my background, I am a graduate of the Levin College. I'm a Muppet, though that's not really the field that I work in directly these days. So in my role I'm a consultant and a senior strategist at ACS, and I know 2 days look the same, but I'm generally working with a portfolio of about 5 to 7 clients that are government or nonprofit or philanthropic leaders throughout the country, and often working to support their efforts to impact change in their communities, which, as we all know, is rooted deeply in policy and engaging in conversations with local elected officials and decision makers. It's a little bit about me. I can certainly get into more detail, but I'd love to hear from some of the other panelists.
Hi, I am Beth Zietlow-DeJesus. I'm Director of External Affairs at the Alcohol, Drug Addiction, and Mental Health Services Board of Cuyahoga County. To tell you, I can't really tell you more about what I do unless I tell you who we are, because most people have heard of us, but they don't know what we do. So we plan, fund, and monitor public mental health and addiction treatment and recovery support services. We do not provide direct behavioral health care service, but we support providers, or we fund providers who do those direct services, and we are the link for advocacy, crisis services planning, substance use treatment. And so what I do in that role is everything. I do media relations, public relations, government relations. We work with client relations. We have stakeholder meetings with all of our providers. And basically, we're all on the same goal to create resiliency and recovery and make sure that people who are struggling with mental illness, substance use disorders, or are feeling suicidal understand where they can access help and find treatment so that they can live lives in recovery too. And that sums up what I do, basically.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shetty Swade. My background is really in both public health and emergency management. And so I've been my career has been intertwined in both of those fields for pretty much the last 10 years. I've been with the Federal Reserve Bank since July of last year. The Federal Reserve Bank of Cleveland is one of 13 reserve banks in the country, and we serve all of Ohio, as well as portions of Pennsylvania, Kentucky, and West Virginia. And so my role as business continuity lead is really to help other people do their jobs better. I work with all the other departments that make up the bank and help them to be prepared for it and help them to respond to any sort of emergency or any sort of disruption of the key functions that they perform. And so a lot of my work is helping people write emergency response plans, testing those plans, helping them kind of poke holes and find gaps to identify and to get stronger and better through training and exercise. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Rob and Alexandra, for including me on this panel, and thank you other panelists as well.
Well, thank you. My name's Dave Greenspan. I've got kind of a diverse background, a little bit on the business side. I've been fortunate to have been served in all three C-suites as chief executive, operating and financial officers for various companies. 2 companies I took public as chief financial officer. So I've kind of got a good grasp, I would say, of the business side of the spectrum. On the elected official side, I've been very fortunate in my my elected service career to kind of be in the right place at the right time. Back in 2005, while living in a suburb of Atlanta, I happened to be fortunate to serve on the inaugural city council of the largest city actually in the country ever to incorporate a city of 100,000 people, first new city in Georgia to do so. in 50 years. I did that till 2007, moved here to Ohio, and then some may recall there was a little bit of a corruption scandal here in Cuyahoga County. I'm not even going to try to speculate how long that went on, but the long and the short of it is, in 2010, there was an election to seat a new government in Cuyahoga County. I was fortunate again to be elected to an inaugural legislative body. So I've done it both at the city and the county level. Through term limits, my state rep position was available in 16. I was elected, served 4 years, 2 terms in the state legislature, and am no longer in the legislature now, but as circumstances have it, I'll be president of the Westlake City Council in January. Nobody filed against me. The filing deadline is passed. So I will be serving and representing my second city, one in Georgia and one here. And I've been fortunate to serve at the municipal, county, and state levels as a legislator. So I believe I bring an understanding of government at those 3 levels, and even some experience at the federal level insofar as advocacy and interacting with federal legislators. So that's a little bit about me, and be glad to answer questions as they come up, and thanks for having this.
You're on mute.
So again, welcome panelists, mentors. You've given us more ideas about your background. Our students, our mentees, provided some questions that help to guide our conversation. And the first has to do with motivation, public service motivation. Now we know a little bit about your backgrounds. Would you please tell us a little bit about your motivation? What are you passionate about in particular? What about public service, or what about particular policy issues make you passionate about doing the kind of work that you do?
I'd love to hop on that one first if nobody minds. So I worked in corporate world before starting as a public servant, and I always felt like something was missing. When I began my career in public service at the city of Cleveland, I finally found what was missing. I knew that helping people and not building profit is where, I needed to be in my career. That was what was important to me. And then I honed my skills around the difference between private sector and public sector PR, and learning how that works. I also have a ton of experience in crisis communications, and was able to hone those skills in a lot at the city of Cleveland. But in my personal life, there is substance use recovery, and there are people who have died from suicide in my family, and people who have attempted suicide and survived. So when the job became available at the ADAMHS board to do this work, helping other people in the areas where I was already passionate, mental health advocacy, suicide prevention, education, and substance use recovery, I hopped at that, but I took a huge leap of faith. I was a director at the city, and I went in at a lower level position at the ADAMHS board just to align my passions with my skill set. And that ended up being a big payoff for me, because I ended up being director. When I say that, I think it's very important that people consider their passions and what they're doing. When you do a job that you are passionate about, it doesn't feel like just another gig, getting up, having to go to work. It is something you are intentional in doing, that it feels like the right thing to do every day. Every day I wake up and I'm happy to come to work and do the work that I do, because I know other people are benefiting from it. And so that's me. Thanks.
If I can add to that, I think, as I've held different positions throughout my career, when I'm explaining to people what I do, I always feel like I see a look on their face like, oh, that's where my taxpayer money's going. And so I've always kind of felt like I felt an obligation that to be a public servant means that, there are people out there who are, putting their faith in you and putting their investment in you, not just financially, but to do a service or to perform a function. And so I've always felt like that was a huge responsibility, and I've always taken pride in that. I've always felt like it's a really big deal to have people have that sort of dependency on you, and to not want to let them down, and to really want to, be a true steward of the government, and so, and of, whatever agency is employing me. And so I've always kind of felt that that was like a responsibility, and something that required like an honor, and something that I really felt an obligation to uphold.
I think that's so, I kind of want to jump off of that a little bit on the flip side, being that I actually am with a for-profit company, with a private firm, but I feel very similar in that there's this obligation to the work that we do when we partner with, our clients are largely government, philanthropy, and nonprofit organizations where they don't have necessarily the same level of capacity that many others do to influence policy systems, what's happening in communities. So working on behalf of organizations that are largely existing in spaces where there's been systemic disinvestment and the implications of racist policies and implicit bias have been really deeply felt. It feels, though I'm in this private space, we're really working on behalf of communities and individuals that really have the least. And I just think it's important to remember that policies are put into place by those who are in a position of power and privilege, and being in the public sphere where we are, working to address major long-term systemic issues in our communities. It's important to remember that, and I feel very honored to be in a position where I can support organizations that are working on behalf of individuals who have historically had less power and privilege in kind of these corridors of legislation and departments.
All right, great. I'll take my story back probably a little more personally. My grandmother for 50 years raised money on a volunteer basis for Israel. And I remember having a conversation with her when I was about 8. And I said, why is it you do this? What is it that motivates you? And she said something then that I remember very vividly. And she said, Dave, anybody can give money, but giving of your time is where the true value is. And so I never looked at, I'm counting now, I've never looked at my 12 years in public service at the city, county, state levels as being anything other than a philanthropic endeavor. To me, it's about giving back. It's about participating in a process in whichever level of government you serve, and every level's got its own distinct areas of responsibility. Obviously, local municipal government is much more granular and it's concerned with much more day-to-day impactful items, whether it's trash pickup or leaf pickup or snow plowing or those types of issues. Not to minimize what local governments do, because there's a lot more to it. Or at the county level, as we work with the ADAMHS board and dealing with some of the drug and addiction issues and mental health issues, or at the state level with the more broad scoping statewide policy. If you stay grounded and rooted in understanding the reason you do this, as I believe the reason I did it and will continue to do it, is it's a way for me to give back in an impactful, meaningful way where I can culminate a lot of the different experiences that I've had in my life, both professionally and personally, and now politically, being able to build upon a foundation. Because at the end of the day, life, and you'll find this out, a lot of the students, who depending where you are in your careers, if you have yet to enter the workforce, life to me is about 3 primary things: experience, exposure, and relationships. And it's how you capitalize on those 3 and use them together. They're not meant, in my mind, to be used independently. So I hope I've kind of addressed the issue. What motivates me is my perspective of this being a philanthropic endeavor, meaning I expect nothing back. I expect only to give.
For real and wonderful stories of public service motivation. They really are public service motivation. Cassie illuminates opportunities in the private sector that allow you to fulfill your public service motivation to the students that are watching this panel. Beth, you talked about honing your skills. I mean, you had a very personal story of what drives you to serve. You also talked about honing your skills with regard to PR in the public sector and crisis communication. And so it helps to transition to the next question that we have from our mentees, and it has to do with what skills you use the most in your work. And they ask you to pivot and talk a little bit, give them some advice of what skills do you recommend that they develop now while they're in school that can help them transition into their service careers. Beth, I kind of put you on the spot, but anyone can feel free to jump in if you've got good ideas. So just what skills are you using the most that seem most relevant to you in your day-to-day work? And then what skills do you recommend that students develop while they're in school?
I think communications is key, and not just because I work in that field. The way that you say something can be perceived differently, and where there is perception, that becomes that person's reality. So making sure that you're clear in communication is a skill that you can work on, and you can work in that in a lot of ways. You know, talking with friends, having interviews with people who are in the fields that you might be looking into is another good way to practice that and learn how to communicate. And then learning how to ask for help. That's not a skill people tell you that you're going to need. And it all, for me, at least in my experience, I was afraid to ask for help. I didn't want to reach out to somebody who was higher up or in a career that I kind of looked forward to see. How did you get there? How did you learn what you need? But when I finally got the courage to do that, that's where I learned how to grow and understood what skills I needed to build and how I could continue to move forward. So that communication for sure, and not being afraid to ask for help and learning how to do that, because sometimes the fear can get in the way of that.
I could not agree with you more, Beth. I think that that's absolutely essential. Asking for help is so hard to do, but it's such a sign of leadership and strength to know what you don't know and ask for support. I would add that one of the things that I have found to be a really hard lesson to learn that was like not covered in any classes that I ever took was really around I'll use the kind of buzzword of self-care. So really learning to establish boundaries around what you do during your work hours and what you do outside of your work hours. That is a difficult skill, and it's one that you can be practicing as students. This is something that I talk with all of my mentees about, of, you know, you have to build in time to recharge and to connect with people in your life and to take the space you need to rest, or you won't be able to show up as your best self in these fields, particularly when we're talking about public service, because everybody who's in public service is in it because they want to make the world a better place. And that's a hard job. So that's a really important thing. I think taking care of yourself and learning how to appropriately set boundaries so that you can show up as your best self in all areas of your life.
Well, I'll jump in. So obviously, I agree with the two other panelists. Communications, but communications. It's not always. I'll kind of refer to it this way. It's not always your outbounding of communications. It's also what you inbound, what you be. So you know, you've heard the phrase. You know, we have one mouth and two ears for a reason, right? So oftentimes, and I used to tell my colleagues this in Columbus, we are not the centers of the universe. You know, the world does not revolve around what we say or what we think. It's important that we stay grounded and rooted in being a good listener to our constituents, in particular, when it came to understanding how to address issues and what those issues are. One of the things that I will say before I believe you can even go there, this is my own experience, you need to understand who you are as an individual. And you need to understand where your moral compass points and what values are important to you, because this is not only a skill in the business world or in the public sector world. This is just a general life skill. When I went to Columbus, Senator Dolan said to me, the only thing you have in this world and the only thing you have in Columbus that matters is your word. And if you do one thing and say another, you will have no credibility. And that to me is a combination skill kind of value. If I want to, can be so if I can put that in those words. But I guess the important thing I would say is, and understand you're going to evolve. I mean, 18-year-old Dave Greenspan to 21-year-old Dave Greenspan to 50-something, 50-something-year-old Dave Greenspan is completely different in how I approach things. But my values have always been the same. If not, I've been able to, maturity brings this out, been able to reassess kind of what's important to me and how to go about and exemplify that. So communication clearly, to get back to the original issue, but I think more to the root of the issue, you have to understand who you are. And you will know quickly if I almost said, the others will know quickly if you're in this for the right reason. Because if you are not genuine, not trustworthy, and your moral compass points anywhere other than true north, you will have problems, and I will just say candidly, you will not be successful. So identify who you are, continue to refine that, and 2 ears and 1 mouth are very important to keep in mind as well.
I would echo everything that the other panelists have said. And just one thing to add as well too is know that you are going to fail and that you are going to make mistakes, and never let those not be teachable moments for you. And never think that just because you mess something up that your career is over, you have to take a different path, or allow your missteps and your misfortunes to be something that you grow from and something that you get better from, and not something that knocks you down a peg.
Shaddy, thank you, and thanks all for the great answers. Dave talked about knowing your moral compass, and he also talked about evolving and growing. And so that helps transition into the next question, a related question. What do you all do for professional development? What are some of the things that you do, that you read, that you participate in to help you stay informed, to help you grow, to help you develop your skills, to essentially, bottom line, to facilitate your professional development?
If I can go first, one of the things that I really enjoy the most about my job is networking with other people who do the same thing that I do in other parts of the country or other parts of the world. And so I belong to a number of professional organizations, and I try to attend their conferences. I try to read their newsletters. But more importantly, I try to use those opportunities to make bonds so that when I run into a problem, if I'm trying to find a solution to a problem, I know that somebody else out there probably is having the same problem and somebody else has found that solution. And so building those bonds with people who do what I do in other places is really helpful. And it really helps to get each other out of jams and to realize, like, we're all on the same team. We're all on the same public service team. And so if what I do in Cleveland, somebody else in Denver or in Texas or in California is doing the same thing and trying to solve the same issues, through that enrichment that I've made and through those connections that I've made in those organizations, I know that we can kind of serve each other and we can not have to reinvent the wheel when we're running into the same types of problems.
I totally agree. I think networking and staying curious is like the #1 thing you can do to grow your professional skills and stay engaged in whatever field you're interested in. I think I read a lot. I think I don't know that we can count like my Twitter feed as a place of professional development, but I do learn an awful lot there all day long. But yeah, reading, pick up books you're interested in, ask people for reading recommendations. One of my mentees, actually, Tanisha, had a suggestion that we swap some books. So we have a little book swap going on. And we have different tastes and different experiences. And so it's a really fun way to get to learn and experience things that are outside of what is, directly in my sphere. Our worlds have gotten a lot smaller. And I think we often see things that are already within our, comfort zone. So asking for recommendations and staying curious.
So interesting. Once again, great feedback, and that's you've got to get external input, and we don't know everything there is to know. But let me just say this, and I've written a couple articles about this. We have become a very polarized society. We tend only to think, read, watch, listen, whether it's TV, radio, podcasts, magazines, whatever it is, what we want to hear on a subject matter. If there are two people, you've got at least three opinions. And I think it's important that we open up outside of our comfort zone and expose ourselves to opinions that we may not agree with, but at least we hopefully can gain an understanding as to where the other side of an opinion or a perspective is coming from. And if you watch Fox News, watch CNN. If you watch CNN, watch MSNBC. It's important that we get out and experience other people's perspectives, because if we keep going down this path that we're going down right now, and we don't grow intellectually beyond the textbook response or your leanings towards an issue, you will not grow as an individual. And so I would encourage people to obviously read up on if it's a subject matter, but also understanding and mindful that other people have differing opinions and they're all worth being respected.
Thank you, Dave, and thank you, panelists, for that question. In the organizational behavior class that I teach in the MPA program, we read a book called Leadership on the Line. And the book's really about, or a big part of the book is about the price that people pay for stepping up and assuming leadership positions, kind of the risks and the challenges that are involved. And all of you have stood up and taken those leadership positions, appointed and elected, represented here in the panel today. A related question has to do with and maybe it's a personal question, and it has to do with, have you been through any difficult work situations in which you felt like you really learned and grew as a leader? And so feel free to pass on the question if you'd like, but this is also an illuminating question that allows the students and we have many of them that are watching and listening, that allows them to gain some insights from your experiences.
Well, I know that some of my biggest learning moments have come in my mistakes, but I also want to say that some of my biggest learning moments have come in my biggest successes. So I don't think you can only learn from your mistakes. There's always room to learn from an error that you've made. I remember during a very high profile case, we had been working with a media producer who went completely off script from the interview when they started the interview. And when it was over, I lost my temper. That's not professional. That's not okay. I had to step back from that and own that. And really, I needed a break. I needed what Cassie said. You have to have boundaries. You have to put self-care in place. That wasn't my finest moment, but I learned that if I'm starting to feel that way, I can step away. But I've also run some incredibly wonderful programs. We ran a pilot program in the juvenile justice system where we put interventions in place for children involved in the system. Trauma-informed yoga, art therapy, music therapy, and group therapy in place for these young people who might not have had that exposure or opportunity. And the changes those little changes that it made in their days, the fact that recidivism dropped down in those areas, that was not an effort that I did. That required collaboration with the justice system, with behavioral health educators, by stepping outside the box and looking for other areas that we could, really reach these kids. We could meet them in their trauma. We could reach them where they were. We could get things in place that maybe would never have worked, and they did, and they made changes. That was a lot of work. It required a lot of partners, but it taught me a lot about what can happen when you put in the work, you listen to others' recommendations, you follow through on what you say you're going to do. And so I always hear that you learn the best things from your mistakes, and I have learned a lot from my mistakes, but also pay attention to what you learn in your biggest successes, and don't forget to reward yourself for that.
So I totally agree. I think that's a really valuable point. we're always learning, and we should be paying attention to both of those things. Absolutely. I think a slightly different kind of lens with which I think about this question is, at the end of the day, we're all humans and we all have personalities and preferences and like other stuff going on in our lives. And we show up into these workplaces, whether it's in virtual or real life. And there is, it is universally true that there will be times when you are in a situation where there are interpersonal challenges and personality challenges that you have to navigate through. And those have been some of the greatest learning experiences for me. And I think it's something we all face at some point in our careers. So with that, I would say, my advice is always to just really, again, remain curious, be open to what's happening around you and other people's perspectives. I like to start from a place of assuming positive intent. And I think it's also really important, especially if you're starting in a new career path or in a new job, or you're an entry-level situation or an internship, that you do have to remember what your value is, because it can be very easy to fall into a place where you feel like you don't know what you're doing and you're uncomfortable and allow people to take advantage of you. So I think there's a balance between being curious and learning and recognizing that you don't know everything, but that you also do bring value to the table, and that there is you need to know that and own that, and that's a really important part of the process.
If I can build off something that you just said, Cassie, I had the unique perspective of working for the City of Cleveland Health Department for the first 6 months of the pandemic, and so I'm going to write a book about those 6 months someday. But when you talk about knowing your true value and knowing what's truly important to you, I think that's a lesson that I really learned through that experience, was when everything around you is just on fire and going crazy, is to really know what is your true north. And I know Dave used that term earlier as well. What is your true mission, and can you turn off all the buzz around you and all of the noise and really focus on what you need to do and what's important in those situations?
Shaddy?
Hey guys, can you hear me? I'm now on my iPhone. I had some internet issues, so I apologize.
Dave, welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back. We're transitioning into the last set of questions that have to do with job search and post-grad advice for students, and feel free to take first crack at this question. But one of the mentees asked, what advice would you give students who are trying to find their way, trying to identify what kind of public service, what kind of jobs they really want to pursue once it's time to make a commitment out on the job search? What advice might you give them about that search, that that journey that they're on?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I hope that folks have, and I think Beth, you were an example of this. You think you want to go down one path, and when you get engaged, you find out that there's something else that interests you. One of the things that, and I think Amir and I talked about this, is getting involved where you can now. If you live in a city, and you want to get involved in some aspect of city government, the cities always look for volunteers. I bet you the ADAMHS board is looking for volunteers to come in and help just observe what they do and can help out. A lot of these organizations have those types of opportunities, because the last thing you want to do is get into a field that you just don't enjoy. You thought you would and you don't. And not that, to Shaddy's point, it's not that we're going to make mistakes in life, right? So don't feel ashamed about making a mistake. But the way to kind of, in my opinion, guide yourself towards at least a better understanding as to make as few mistakes as possible. And I always tell my kids, and I don't expect you not to make a mistake. I don't expect you to make the same mistake twice. So, but to that point, get involved, find out, if you've got an interest in in planning, contact the Cuyahoga County Planning Commission and see if they have an opportunity there for you to get involved in city planning. If it's addiction, mental health services, the ADAMHS board is a great opportunity to reach out to that organization. If it's Parks and Rec, whatever it is, whatever your interests are, there are opportunities for you to engage, sometimes and more likely in an internship environment, an unpaid internship, but you get that grassroots experience of understanding what is out there. And I hope that helps. I mean, it gives you kind of a free opportunity to dig into the workforce without making having to make a multi-year correction.
I think something that a mistake that a lot of young people make is that they think that they're going to graduate and they're going to get a degree and then they're going to go get a job and they're going to do that job for 30 years. A lot of people think of their career in the same way they do of their spouse. Like, this is the person I'm meant to be with, and I'm going to be with them, forever. And don't think of your career like your spouse. Think of your career of, I'm going to try something. It's going to serve me for 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 years. I'm going to take the lessons learned from that and I'm going to branch out, or it's going to send me down a different path. So don't feel like at 22 or at 25 or at 26 that you have to find the job or the career that you're going to do until the day that you retire. Feel like you can do something for as long as it serves you and for as long as you can serve it. And it's perfectly acceptable and it's perfectly normal to take that opportunity and then move on to something else. I have not, in the last 10 years, the longest I've been in one job is like 3 years, because I find that, I branch out or family changes occur, things like that, but use that don't feel like you're obligated to stick with that or feel a loyalty to something. If you're not serving it, and if it's not serving you, then it's time for you to go down a different path.
Yeah, and I'd like to piggyback on that just a little bit. When I graduated from my undergrad degree, the job market was awful. There were no jobs. You couldn't get a job no matter what. So a position came up where I could manage a bar. I was like, well, I want to be in management at some point, and I'll need to promote the stuff that's happening at the bar, so that pairs my PR stuff. But I went into that knowing I wasn't going to be a bar manager forever. I was going to do that for now, learn what I could, and have a job while I was looking for my next step. And that's what exactly what I did. It didn't need to be my forever job. Like Shaddy said, you don't need to be married to your position. You have the ability to change as you learn and grow. And you might find that, your whole world changes, your whole perception changes, where you want to be changes. I originally went into retail because retail management, thinking that's where I wanted to be. I wanted to sell products and I wanted to do that. And I got there and it just felt so ick and I felt so unfulfilled. And that taught me that I wanted to do something different. So then I could look in the different direction to drive myself there. So just know that you're not stuck. If you need to take a job, take a job. You don't need to struggle without an income while you wait for the perfect opportunity that can come along. And don't be afraid to take risks.
I would totally echo what everyone said. And I would also add that as you're job searching, and I recognize that there's an inherent level of privilege to what I'm about to say, because there are certainly times when you need to take a job because you don't have the financial luxury or the support system or the safety net to not. But this kind of goes back to remembering like what your expertise, competence, and value is. And remember that every time you're looking at a job description or interviewing for a job, you're interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you, and asking questions and getting information that allows you to identify whether or not the organization or the company or the, whatever position, the department you're applying to aligns with your values. Because and again, there will always be times, I think, where we find ourselves in situations that are not a great fit, and being willing to just recognize that and learn from it and move on. But just because you're applying for a job doesn't mean that you have to just, they're not just interviewing you. So I would just add that to the mix.
I ditto that.
So thank you all for the answers and your insights. A kind of key takeaway from your insights is the importance of showing up, the importance of putting yourself out there and taking some risks, of just seeing what you think about a certain situation, a certain agency, a certain public service area, et cetera. It's one of the things that I talk about to our students on a regular basis. They're on their journey, they're exploring. And the Levin College gives students the opportunity to pursue that journey, to explore, to look at different opportunities. And so you do that with internships, you do that with volunteer opportunities, informal networking, and especially in the mentoring program. Now I see the list of names, the attendees of our students and our alumni. And how many of you have heard me talk about the importance of the mentoring program and the doors that are opened? And what's the worst case scenario? You see a situation, you see a policy domain, you see a service delivery area or an agency that really doesn't motivate you. That's the worst case scenario, but that's part of your journey. And so again, important stuff. And that doesn't happen for Levin students without the vision that Dean Anglin has to support these programs, without Rob and Alexandra organizing, without the vision that the late great Senator Grace Drake had for the mentoring program. And it especially doesn't happen without the mentors that are here today as panelists, and also the mentors that are involved with the program. Over 60 mentors this year, so important. And again, I celebrate and thank you for what you do, mentors, because it's so important for our students. There was a question that was emailed to Alexandra from one of the student attendees, and it has to do with the difference between working in the private sector and the public sector. And Beth, you talked about it in the very last answer, and some of you have already talked about some of the differences in the public and the private sectors. But the student asks, what would you say are the key differences between the public and private sector? Are any benefits for either, any negatives? Anyone want to pick this up?
I will just say that public service is not for everyone. It just isn't. It worked for me because it does align with my true north and what I wanted to do. And I'm not dissing private sector work in any way when I said that. It just felt for me like something was missing. But you are held accountable. You are working on the taxpayer's dime to achieve what the taxpayer wants based on what is being done there. And yes, you're doing it to help build a better good, to make a better world, and that's where our service is driven. But there is layers of bureaucracy, which many of us, and in 5 years, I imagine a whole new young workforce is going to come in and beat down those layers of bureaucracy. So I'm looking forward to that happening. However, there's things you have to learn to deal with in public sector, and I'm sure they're very similar in private sector work, but not accountable to the taxpayer when you're working at a corporation. In public sector, everything you write and email, say, or do is a public record. Anyone can look for that, and you are held accountable for your words. You are held accountable for your actions and what you do there. So it really is more, for me, it was about accountability for me to the public versus being accountable to building a profit for a company. Those were the big differences for me, and that just didn't align with me internally.
Yeah, so I've done both. I've been engaged. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I've been engaged in the public sector, working for large corporations, as I said, small corporations, and I've been an elected official. Beth is right. If you don't have a thick skin, if you want to be an elected official, if you want to put your name on the ballot, especially in today's environment, and you don't have a thick skin, it will eat you up and spit you out. There's no doubt about it. You may not even get through a campaign. It is I always used to tell people I love the public policy. I really do. Mine. Everybody else's is horrible, right? Because there are things you wind up voting on that you would never in a million years bring up because you may not believe that issue to be as important as some of the other issues that you perceive. And that's the beauty of the system, right? I mean, we all come with different temperaments, talents, and convictions to our various positions, but you're forced to vote on issues that you know are controversial. You don't necessarily fully agree with it. You agree with it enough where you're going to vote for it or against it, and there are consequences. And consequences, unfortunately, in today's elected official world, are extremely magnified by social media in particular, because I believe people now become so desensitized. If I share with you the amount of death threats, the amount of threatening emails, the amount of security details that I've had to have, or camera systems put on my house, protections for my family because somebody doesn't agree with a vote I've taken or a position I've made, if you don't have a thick skin, it will not go well for you. You will not emotionally be able to handle it. Once again, the benefit though, public policy can be awesome as long as it gets done the way you want it to get done. But if you come into an elected environment with the expectation of no compromise and no sacrifice, you will be unsuccessful. But it's like that in anything. It's like that in any relationship. You compromise, you don't sacrifice. But if you come to the table with the inability to compromise, you will be sorely mistaken and you'll probably not get a whole lot done. So there is a big distinct difference. Beth talked about the public records aspect of it. It is a necessary component of the public sector, but it does restrict the ability to operate in a more traditional business environment. The accountability to the taxpayer is there, it's real, and it should be there. The bureaucracy and how long it takes to get things done, I think the process is slow and deliberate for a reason. You don't want snap judgment major policies, but at the same time, sometimes the policy takes too long and the process outlasts the issue. And that happens all too often. Or it prolongs itself, whether in Ohio it's education funding, whether it's treatment services, and we know, and Beth knows this all too well, we just don't have enough treatment facilities and beds to deal with the issues we have in the legislature. It takes a long time to get some stuff done, and then even when you get it done, there are hoops to go through to get that money where it's needed. Some of it's necessary, some of it's not. So the big difference between the two, look, in the public sector, if you're a public company, you're accountable to the shareholders. The issue is the shareholders, though, in a corporation are not as great as the shareholders are in the electorate. So in Ohio, there are 11.7 million people, and every one of them deserves to be heard, and that's who you're accountable to. So I probably rambled on into a couple of different areas, but to sum it up in a few words, if you're going to get involved in the public arena as an elected official, you better have a thick skin, and you better have the ability to compromise, because otherwise you won't be successful. And now I'll mute myself.
Now, this is actually a topic that my mentee and I, Tariq and I, have talked about quite a bit. And one of the biggest differences I've found is that in the public sector, a lot of positions, not all, but a lot of positions are grant funded. And so I've come into jobs with an expectation of, this is what I need to do to be successful. These are the risks and hazards and vulnerabilities that I need to address. These are the plans I need to write. These are the things I need to do. And then your funders come along and they say, we'll give you this money, but we're going to give you this money to do this specific thing. And this specific thing may or may not serve the interest that you think is in the best interest of yourself or of the constituents that you serve. And so there is a constant imbalance in the public sector between doing the things that I know I need to do my job the right way versus doing the things that the people that give me grants ask me to do on their behalf. And so it's a challenge. It's a challenge. And if you can get those two worlds to collide, that's when you reach Valhalla. That's the true synergy that everybody aims for.
I think only people in public service can laugh heartily at these comments that are being made.
We have another student question that just came in real time, and we've got some answers that have already touched on it, but maybe if anybody wants wants to summarize or to give new insights. It really has to do with starting out without any experience, pre-service, and the student asks and tells us, I'm really interested in the public sector, but I don't have any job experience. Where should I start? What should I do first? And so we've touched on this a little bit, but does anybody want to summarize or offer some new insights?
Yeah, I will jump in, and I know it's really echoing what everyone has said in this conversation of figuring out, where your values lie and what things you think you're interested in. So, the public sector is a very big place and it covers a lot of different topic areas. So I think that would be the first place I'd suggest, spend a little time thinking about, writing about, talking to your friends and family about, what is important to you in the world, and what do other people see you showing up to care about and invest in? Where do you volunteer your time? And then, work to match that with opportunities in the public sector. And by opportunities, I mean opportunities to learn and to meet people and network with folks. So just get as much information as you possibly can to narrow down the types of things you think you're interested in. And then, when that job comes along or that internship comes along that you think is perfect, it might teach you that you do want to be in a different role, or you don't want to be in the field that you were in, or the types of clients or constituencies you're serving aren't the ones that you feel like you can most represent. So I think just get curious and start exploring.
You may not feel like you have experience, but you certainly have skills. And so one of the things that I'm a big list maker, one of the things I would always encourage people to do is make 2 lists. Make a list of these are the skills that I have, and then make a list of these are the skills that I want to develop. And don't think of it as I want to go do this for a job, or I want to go do that for a job. Think of it of these are, I want to go do something that's going to allow me to both build on what I already have and to develop what I don't have. And so when you try to find opportunities that way, I think you'll be far more fulfilled than trying to otherwise like put a square peg in a round hole.
And in public sector, there are a lot of collaborations and coordinations where people are working together. Almost always a new student or somebody who wants to learn more about that can just come and listen in and be part of that. I know at the ADAMHS board, we have a ton of those, like the Suicide Prevention Coalition. We have a Mental Health Response Advisory Committee. We have all kinds of efforts like that where you can sit in and you can learn from other people. When you meet people, then you can outreach and say, what you said interested me. Can I have an informal interview with you? Maybe so we can just talk about what it is that you actually do. You'll find that most people for informational interviews are almost always willing to say yes. As long as they can make time, they absolutely will make time to do that, because we love what we do. I mean, I think you can see that from just the people here. We'll always make time for someone else. And I found that to be true when I was job seeking and new and felt like I was inexperienced, talking to others and figuring out what skills you actually need. But yeah, don't be afraid to ask for those in areas where you think you might want to be. Just those interviews might tell you that that's not where you want to be, and you can look at another area of interest.
I think it gets back to, I would just like add on that, what Dave said at the very start of this conversation, that relationships are critical, and the best thing you can do is, get to know folks and ask questions. And when you're doing those informational interviews, like reach out to the people, even the people you think are too busy or too important, because we all, especially folks in the public service field, they're in it for a reason. And so I think to Beth's point, like people are more likely to say yes than no. So don't be afraid to ask, to get to know somebody or do an informational interview. And I always suggest that when you finish that conversation, you ask them for another name or two, because it'll just help you grow and build your network. And you never know where your next opportunity is going to come from.
Cassie, here's a related question, a follow-up question to the advice that you just gave, and it comes from one of our mentees. Are there any interviewing tactics that were particularly useful to you or helped you succeed in the job search? And so Cassie, you can jump in and take this first, or any of our mentors can feel free if there's anything that comes to mind, any interview strategies, tactics that were particularly fruitful throughout your careers.
Yeah, I think that for me, the advice I would give is to show up to any interview, no matter what it's for, as if it's your dream job. Because you never know whether or not you get the job or it's not a good fit. It can turn into something else. And I'll just give a very quick example. When I was job hunting back in 2012, I interviewed for a couple positions that I was not super excited about, that I didn't think would be quite the right fit, but I, needed a job. And one in particular, I was not a great fit for, but the person that I interviewed with was very impressed with my resume and the way I interviewed. And that led to me being employed with ACS for 5 years. Because his wife is one of the co-founders of the company. So treat every single opportunity as, the most important opportunity, and just see where it takes you.
Yeah, I would add, and Cassie, I think you mentioned this, the fit for employment is mutual. Remember that. You may get in, and to Cassie's point, you may get in and you or look at the job description and think this is it. I mean, this is exactly what I'm looking for. And then you start asking the right questions, the questions that you have. And you might find out, this may not be the right opportunity. Don't force yourself into an employment situation. Don't set yourself up to fail. You may go in, as Cassie said, and think, maybe, and you find out it's the best thing since sliced bread and you love it. You might go in there thinking it's the best thing since sliced bread and get in there and find out, holy crud, I'm not at all interested in the other half of the job that's not on the job description. There's always that fine line, other duties as assigned, and then you find out those other duties you completely disagree with. And it's a tough slug. I mean, you don't want to be unemployed, but at the same time, you don't want to put yourself in an employment situation where you're not going to grow and develop. You're not going to reach your potential. And candidly, you're probably going to harm the organization in some way, inadvertently. So understand that the job interview is not them liking you. You have to like them as well. And so the techniques, however you need to determine what that is, because you'll get into a situation and they'll ask you a question in the interview. I'll give my first job, they asked me if I played softball. Now, thank goodness I played softball, but if I didn't, if I said no, I'm just using that as a, I mean, I could think of a bunch of different situations. My point is this: it's a mutual relationship. Treat it that way. You wouldn't become friends with somebody because they're the only person in your block. You're friends with them because you want to be friends with them. You want that job because it's going to advance you in your career, and they want to have you because you're going to fill a need for them. Don't go into it thinking it's one-sided.
The only other thing I would add is that when they ask you if you have questions, have them prepared. Know what you want to ask and ask about what they talked to you about. Dig in deeper. If you heard something that made you think, I want to know more about that, ask more about that. Don't let that opportunity pass you by, because that's where that mutual understanding, or that is this job really a good fit for me conversation actually will sink in for you.
Yeah, and one final point, I don't mean to interrupt here, but that's a great point. Do as much research about the organization going in. And to Beth's point, if you've got questions, if there's an area you have a specific interest in and you saw it on their website, or if it's a public company and it's in their public filings, meaning their SEC filings, drill down in that issue. Say, look, I'm really interested in let's say Beth's world, because I have a little more familiarity with Beth's world. If you're interested in mental health services, and you have an interest in addiction or suicide prevention, mental health is really your specialty. Say, well, Beth, I noticed on your website as an example that you provide work with these organizations. What is it about them that is important? Or my point is, do research in advance of the interview about the possible employer, as much research as you can. As Beth brought up a great point, have questions written down already. It's something I used to do, and I was chief financial officer, and I would geek out by looking at public filings. I would ask whomever I was interviewing with about a specific financial issue that I read about in their 10K or their public filing. First of all, it would impress them, first of all, that you took the time to do that. But number two, it gave me an insight into their corporate culture, because I knew, you just kind of figure that out. So research on the employer is important. And remember, it's got to be mutual fit.
If I can just add one comment to that, everything Dave said is absolutely right. And I've been involved in hiring people and in onboarding, and you can usually tell when you're interviewing somebody within the first 5 minutes or the first 2 or 3 questions if they've done that homework or not. It usually becomes abundantly clear, and it changes the tone of the interview completely.
Good advice from all. Hope that the students and mentees and alumni were listening. We're starting to transition into the final part of the panel. I want to reiterate that our audience, feel free to ask questions in the Q&A box, and we'll get to them. One of the questions that's been reoccurring in these panels has to do with mentoring. Why do you mentor, and how is it rewarding for you to mentor?
I go first. I think that I'm a big Ohio State football fan, and so Woody Hayes, like, one of the most important things Woody Hayes ever said was, you can never pay it back, but you can pay it forward. So I can't go back and like, I get emotional when I talk about this. Like, I can't go back and thank everybody who helped me get where I am. I can't do for them what they did for me. All I can do is do that for somebody else, because I wouldn't have any of the positions that I've had in my career if somebody didn't stick their neck out on my behalf. And so for me to be able to provide that to somebody else, if I can just, move somebody an inch closer to where they want to be, then I feel like I will have in some way, like, done this karmic payback to the universe, that somebody did that for me at one point. It's my turn to do that for somebody else.
Well, I was picking up my phone here because my battery's on my iPhone here, which is a big drain on my battery since my internet went out. I go back to originally when I mentioned my grandmother, right? And her comments about people anybody give money, but time is where the value is. And to kind of piggyback on Shaddy's comments, I do it to give back, right? Whatever the motivation is. I look at my public service as a philanthropic endeavor, and if I'm able to, there's kind of the phrase, when you leave the organization, whatever the organization is, you want to leave it in better shape than when you came there, when you started. I don't know if the organization I'm talking about is life, if the organization is a business, is a community, whatever it is, I want to leave it. And I'll leave it generic, better than when I found it. And so, is that what motivates me? Maybe, probably, I would say yes. So find out what that is within you. For me, it's leaving it better than when I found it.
And for me, I mentor because I can't wait to learn more from my mentees. I have never been in a situation where I'm mentoring someone that I didn't learn more from them just based on conversation than I've learned in my experience. And then just having shared experiences and telling stories of how other people who were influential in my career path, maybe how they helped me, how they were there for me, how we can lean on them. That was the best part, but the most rewarding part for me is learning from my mentee, and that is that's my favorite part.
I agree with everyone, and especially Shaddy. I get a little emotional when I think about this program in particular and mentoring more generally. Having, administered this program with Senator Drake for almost 2 years, I have seen the impact that mentoring has on individuals, outside of my own experiences. And this is just, it's so vital. And I know that the senator would often talk about, in particular, how essential mentoring is to young women or women in general to gain access to the hopes and the dreams and the career paths that they are looking for. And that was just this constant mission that she was always striving for. So to have been so fortunate to, I always joke, I had the best mentor of all, because I had Senator Drake. And I also got to have all of the other mentors too, because I was connecting with everyone. And it's truly just, it's a dream to be on the other side, to be supporting other, young individuals or people starting out in new career paths. And I just feel really, really fortunate.
Well, thank you all, mentors, and thank you for everything that you do for the Levin College and for our students. It makes a huge impact, a huge difference. We'll start to wrap up our panel today, and I guess we'll end the discussion with one more question, one more prompt. Maybe just I'll ask, do you have any parting words, any parting advice for our students today?
So here, and this just kind of dawned on me. You will face times of adversity as you go through your journey, whatever your journey may be, wherever you are in your career, whether you're starting midway through or rounding third base. The best advice I can give is, as you go through the ups and downs, you will hit some downs, is to do not be, and I think I've talked about this before, not today, but Rob may have heard this, do not be a reactionary leader. All right. People don't want people who knee jerk and make quick decisions or act irrationally. If you want to be a leader, people want to see composure. They want to see a steadfast resolve to do what's right. Don't feel as if you have to give an answer or take a response immediately in most situations. I mean, if it's life and death, that's a different scenario. But if you're faced with a challenge, take an opportunity. Don't tweet real or text real quick or hit send on your email. Take some time, reflect on what is the right thing to do. It may require, when I was CFO of my first public company, it was during the .com era, and our stock was going up and down every day, and I had investors calling me. And there were times where I would just literally take an hour walk and just clear my head and come back more in a more composed fashion. People want composed, non-reactive leaders. And that would be my parting advice as relates to just in general.
So I very similar to Dave's advice. I think is at the core, be authentic, know who you are, and be authentic to who you are. And that means taking a minute when you need it and saying, I don't know, and asking questions and being vulnerable, I think is the absolute best thing you can do as you're continuing your education and moving into whatever is next for you in your career path. Just be authentic.
Something that Dave mentioned a few questions ago, I think kind of resonates with the advice that I would give people about wanting to leave a place better than when you found it. And in the same regard, don't ever burn a bridge. Don't ever have such a negative experience with someone or with some opportunity that you remove that from your life forever. I always try to keep in touch with people that I've worked with in the past. I always try to leave those relationships on good terms, and leave jobs on good terms, and move through my career on good terms, because you never know when down the road somebody that you may have thought you would never ever cross paths with again would be sitting at the other end of a table interviewing you, or will be, able to give you a recommendation or something like that. And so as you move through your career, continue to branch out and continue to make those connections, continue to foster those connections, and don't ever pass up an opportunity to connect with somebody, and because you never know what that person can do for you or what you can do for that person down the road.
And I would just say, when you're feeling really stuck, find one thing to be grateful for. That can change your whole attitude, and especially when you're searching. If you've tried job after job and each interview didn't work out or it didn't feel right, and you're in that place, try to focus on, wow, I'm so grateful that I was able to find these 5 interviews during COVID, right? It's very hard to find jobs right now. That whole change in thought can change your mentality as you're moving forward. So just try not to get stuck in the negative. And if you find yourself going that way, do something, change one thing up in your daily routine. Honestly, brush your teeth in a different order than you shower. I know that sounds silly, but it can change your whole day. Or find one thing to be grateful for. Just that small bit of mindset change can really help you out. And that might seem like silly advice, but I promise you it has worked for me in a million dark days.
Mentors, panelists, thank you so much. Thank you for everything that you do. Now I will hand the panel back to Rob Zeil. Rob, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I just want to thank our panelists and Dr. Wukich for everything you've done today. Every time I hear our panelists, I think of Grace Drake, the founder, and kind of like the inspiration for all this stuff. And Grace told me, she said, find the best and the brightest leaders in the community, and the rest will take care of itself. And every time I listen to you all, I think of her, and I know that she's smiling down on all of us today. And I know she's proud of what we've done for this past year, and proud of the whole family of mentors that we have that are in this program. And so on behalf of Grace and behalf of the college and university, I just want to say, like, a heartfelt thank you for everything that you've done for us, not only today and on the panel, but for being there, as far as giving great sound advice, being willing to put yourself out there in a mentoring capacity, be willing to volunteer your time. I know you all have very busy schedules, so I just want to say thank you. And my job is to kind of find the best and brightest, and then get out of the way, because you all are fantastic. Our faculty are fantastic. And I want to end by saying thank you to Alexandra. She puts a ton of time into the behind the scenes to work with all of our students and mentors for the matches, as well as investing time in as far as what the content looks like for these different types of sessions that we have. So it looks flawless and it runs fantastic, but there's a ton of time and effort put behind the scenes to make sure that we have the outstanding program. So I just want to say thank you to Alexandra Higgle for all the effort you all have done. So I just want to say this concludes our series for this year. We will be planning more events in the future. We will not be over for the year. We still have our speed networking event, and then our celebration at the end of the year in April. For all of you that are part of the program, we will see you soon. For those of you that are guests, whether you're students in our academic classes or outside folks that are interested in the program, please stay in touch. Feel free to join us for future events, and we look forward to having everybody in the next session. So stay warm, and good luck in your evening activities. Hope everybody's safe and sound in dealing with the pandemic. So to all of our panelists, Cassie, Shaddy, Beth, and Dave, thank you. And Clayton, great job. So great night, everybody. Take care.